I thought she would change, that one day the volatile outbursts would stop, and the mother of my children would become the woman I'd married. I was wrong. My name is Kellen Hayes, and I'm 38 years old. Each morning now starts with making lunches, while Noah and Gracie finish their homework at the kitchen table. A quiet routine we fought hard to preserve. When the glass shattered against the wall and my children's terrified faces watched their mother lunge at me, something inside me hardened. My hands trembled as I positioned myself between Tessa and our children, her rage burning in a way I'd never seen before. Officer Reynolds documented everything: the cuts on my palm, the trembling children, Tessa's unchecked fury. Darlene Whitaker, Tessa's mother, helped craft the lies that nearly stole my children away. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. The Tuesday evening started like most others. I'd gotten home from work early enough to throw together my famous spaghetti, just jar sauce doctored with extra garlic and basil, while the kids finished homework at the kitchen table. Noah was hunched over his math workbook, erasing furiously at a problem that had given him trouble. Gracie colored with the determined focus only a 7-year-old can muster, her tongue poking out slightly between her teeth. When Tessa walked in, she dropped her purse on the counter with enough force that all three of us looked up. "Rough day?" I asked, stirring the sauce. She shrugged, poured a generous glass of wine, and disappeared upstairs to change. By the time dinner was ready, we were all seated around the table. The normalcy felt fragile somehow, like we were actors in a play where everyone had forgotten half their lines. I'd checked our bank account during lunch and found several cash withdrawals I didn't recognize. 300 here, 500 there. Money we didn't have to spare. The mortgage was already 2 weeks late. "Tess," I said, keeping my voice casual while passing the garlic bread, "I noticed some withdrawals from the checking account. Did something come up?" Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Why are you tracking my spending?" "I'm not tracking anything. I was paying bills and saw the withdrawals." Noah's eyes flickered between us before dropping back to his plate. He twirled spaghetti around his fork with deliberate concentration, pretending not to listen. Gracie clutched her fork tightly, eyes wide. "So, now I need permission to use our money?" Tessa's voice had that dangerous edge I'd come to recognize. "That's not what I said." I set my napkin down carefully. "The mortgage is due, and we're already behind. I just need to know where the money went, so we can budget accordingly." "Stop policing me, Kellen." She emphasized each word, her knuckles whitening around her wine glass. "We need the mortgage current, Tess." I kept my voice low, aware of Noah's shoulders tensing. "That's all I'm saying." The chair legs scraped against the floor as she stood abruptly, grabbing the half-empty wine bottle by the neck. "You want to talk about money? Fine. Let's talk about how your salary barely covers the basics, while I'm stretched thin trying to make everything work." "That's not fair," I said, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. "We agreed on our budget together. If something's changed, we need to discuss it rationally." "Say controlling one more time," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rising tension. "You want control? Here." The wine bottle smashed against the wall beside the doorframe, sending glass and red liquid spraying across the beige paint. Gracie screamed. Noah's chair scraped back as he jumped to his feet. "Not in front of them," I said, standing slowly, hands slightly raised. "They should see what a coward looks like," Tessa spat, lunging toward me. Her ring caught my cheek as she swung, and I felt the sting of torn skin. I stumbled backward, hands up, not to strike but to block. Blood trickled warm down my face. "Noah! Gracie! Get behind me!" I shouted, maneuvering to place myself between them and their mother. Gracie was sobbing now, and Noah had gone pale, his hand protectively on his sister's shoulder. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, never taking my eyes off Tessa, who stood trembling with rage just feet away. "I'm recording this," I said, hitting the video button, "and I'm calling the police." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed, but something in my face must have told her I was serious. The 911 operator answered almost immediately. I explained the situation in clipped sentences, keeping the phone recording as I spoke. Tessa paced the kitchen like a caged animal, alternating between screaming accusations and pleading with me to hang up. When Officer Reynolds arrived 15 minutes later, the kitchen looked like a crime scene. He separated us immediately, talking to me in the living room while another officer stayed with Tessa in the kitchen. I could hear her voice rising and falling, words indistinct, but tone unmistakable. "I need to document those cuts," Reynolds said, photographing the gash on my cheek and the smaller cuts on my palm from when I'd reflexively reached toward the broken glass. He interviewed the children separately, their small voices barely audible from the next room. When he walked Tessa out under an emergency protective order, she wouldn't look at me. The front door closed with a quiet click that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Noah and Gracie huddled against me on the couch, both still trembling slightly. "Is Mom coming back tonight?" Noah whispered, his voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. I stared at the front door, arms wrapped around both children, wondering what story Tessa would tell next. Morning light spilled through the kitchen blinds as I poured Cheerios into 2 bowls. My hands were steadier than I expected. The cut on my palm throbbed, but I'd wrapped it in gauze after the kids fell asleep. The scratch on my cheek looked worse in the bathroom mirror than it had felt, a jagged red line that would probably leave a mark. I took out my phone and snapped several photos from different angles, making sure the timestamp was visible. Then I lowered my voice and made a quick voice note, describing exactly what had happened the night before, while it was still fresh in my memory. Noah shuffled into the kitchen first, his hair sticking up at odd angles. He'd always been an early riser, even as a baby. I remembered those dawn feedings, his tiny fist curled around my finger while Tessa slept. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life now. "Where's Mom?" he asked quietly, sliding onto his chair. "She's staying somewhere else for a little while," I said, setting his cereal in front of him. The police officer helped arrange that. Gracie appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit by one ear. She'd had it since she was 3. Its fur was matted, and one eye was missing, but she wouldn't sleep without it. Last night, I'd found her holding it against her face, muffling her sobs. "Did Mom go to jail?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I crouched down to her level. "No, honey. She's just staying somewhere else while we figure things out." I didn't know how else to explain it. How do you tell a 7-year-old that her mother wasn't allowed within 500 feet of her father? My phone rang as I was wiping milk from Gracie's chin. Officer Reynolds's number flashed on the screen. "Mr. Hayes, just calling to let you know the judge signed off on the temporary protective order this morning," he said. "It's good for 14 days. You'll need to attend a hearing after that to extend it if necessary." "Thank you," I said, stepping into the living room away from the kids. "What happens now?" "The order's been served, and we've explained the restrictions. She can't contact you directly or come to the house." He paused. "Document everything, Mr. Hayes. Every call, every text, every incident. It matters." After getting the kids to school, Noah silent in the back seat, Gracie asking 3 times if Mom would pick them up, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wine stain on the wall. I should clean it up, I thought. Instead, I took more photos, capturing the broken glass I'd swept into a dustpan but hadn't thrown away. The doorbell rang just after 3 o'clock. A courier with an envelope. I signed for it, stomach already knotting before I knew what was inside. The petition hit me like a physical blow. Tessa was requesting emergency custody of Noah and Gracie, based on claims of long-term emotional and physical abuse. The words swam before my eyes. pattern of controlling behavior, explosive anger, children in danger. Attached was a sworn affidavit from Darlene, claiming she'd witnessed me manhandling Tessa during arguments, had seen bruises she'd tried to hide, had heard me belittling and threatening her daughter. Pure fiction. Complete fabrication. My hands shook with anger as I dialed Cara Lou's number. "They're lying," I said when she answered. "All of it. It's backward. She attacked me. The kids saw it." "Slow down, Kellen." Kara's voice was calm, steadying. "I need you to take a deep breath. These are serious allegations, but they're also predictable. This is how high-conflict custody battles often begin. What do I do?" The paper trembled in my hand. "First, stay calm. Document everything. Receipts, text messages, emails, photos of your injury. Start organizing financial records, medical records for the kids, school reports. We'll need it all." She paused. "And Kellen? No matter what, do not contact Tessa or her mother. Not a word." After dinner, pizza I'd barely tasted, Noah lingered at the table while Gracie went to pick out her bedtime story. "Dad?" His voice was small. "Did Mom lie? About you hurting her?" The question cut deeper than Tessa's ring had. I looked at my son's face, so much like mine, but with Tessa's eyes, and saw the confusion there, the desperate need to understand. "Yes, buddy, she did." I reached across the table for his hand. Sometimes adults say things that aren't true because they're scared or angry, but the truth matters, and it will come out. I promise. He nodded, but his eyes were uncertain. Later, after tucking them both in, I returned to the kitchen and stared at the petition lying on the table. Darlene had always been cold toward me, but this level of deliberate deception was something else entirely. The thought of her testifying against me in court made me physically ill. She'd known Noah and Gracie their whole lives. Her words carried weight. Kara's office sat on the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise with views of the river and courthouse. I'd been there once before, years ago, for the will my parents insisted we draft after Noah was born. The memory hit me as I waited. Dad's hand on my shoulder, his voice, "Always plan ahead, son." He wouldn't have planned for this. Kara entered with a brisk handshake and a sympathetic nod. She'd aged well since our last meeting. A few more smile lines, hair now in a sleek bob instead of the longer cut I remembered. "Before we start," she said, settling behind her desk, "how are Noah and Gracie holding up?" "They're quiet. Noah's having nightmares. Gracie keeps asking when her mom's coming home." I rubbed my eyes. I don't know what to tell them. The truth. Scaled to their understanding. Kara opened a leather portfolio. Children are remarkably perceptive. They know something's wrong, even if we try to shield them. She slid a yellow legal pad across the desk. "From this moment forward, I need you to live as if there's a camera on you at all times, because in a sense, there is. The court will scrutinize every choice you make." I nodded, throat tight. "Keep journals of every interaction related to the children, or Tessa. Times, dates, what was said, who was present. If the kids mention something about that night, write it down verbatim." Her pen tapped against the desk. "Child Protective Services will likely conduct interviews soon. Be cooperative, but don't volunteer information beyond what's asked." "Will they take my kids?" The question had been haunting me. "Not based on what you've told me." Kara's voice softened slightly. "But this isn't just about the violence, Kellen. Tessa's made allegations and CPS has to investigate. Be honest, be calm, and remember, this is about establishing what environment is safest for Noah and Gracie." I left with a folder of instructions, forms, and a hollow feeling in my chest. That night, I started the journal Kara suggested, documenting the kids' bedtime routine, Noah's quiet questions, Gracie's reluctance to sleep alone. 3 days later, my doorbell rang at exactly 2:15 p.m. A woman with dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail stood on my porch, ID badge clipped to her blazer. "Mr. Hayes? I'm Marcy Torres from Child Protective Services. We spoke on the phone yesterday." I showed her in, trying to ignore how my hands trembled slightly as I offered her water or coffee. "The children will be home from school soon?" she asked, declining both. "Yes. Their grandmother, my mother, is bringing them. She should be here any minute." Marcy nodded, setting up a small recording device on the coffee table. "I'll need to speak with them individually, and then together. It's best if you wait in another room." Mom arrived with Noah and Gracie, giving me a tight hug before heading home. I introduced Marcy as someone who talks to kids about their families, which wasn't a lie. I waited in the kitchen, close enough to hear murmurs but not words, reorganizing the junk drawer to keep my hands busy. 45 minutes felt like 4 hours. Marcy interviewed Noah first. When it was Gracie's turn, he trudged into the kitchen, expression solemn. "You okay, buddy?" I asked. He shrugged, picking at a hangnail. "She asked about the night Mom got mad." My chest tightened. "What did you tell her?" "That Mom throws things when she's mad." He looked up at me, his eyes too old for his face. I showed her my drawing. "Drawing?" "From school counseling, the one with Mom and the red lines." He demonstrated with his hands, jagged motions in the air. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral while my stomach dropped. I hadn't seen the drawing, but I could imagine it. Stick figures and the visual language of a child processing trauma. After Marcy finished with Gracie, she called them both in together for a few final questions. When they emerged, Gracie's eyes were red-rimmed. "Can we watch TV?" Noah asked, hand on his sister's shoulder. "Sure," I said, "just for a little while." In the kitchen, Marcy packed her notes. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Hayes." "How did it go?" I asked, voice low. "I can't discuss specifics, but both children appeared comfortable with you." She paused. Gracie mentioned feeling scared when her mother yells. Noah was quite forthcoming about witnessing the incident. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote everything down. Every detail I could remember about the interviews, the kids' demeanor, Marcy's comments. That evening, I cooked pasta while Noah and Gracie drew at the kitchen table. The normalcy felt forced but necessary. Pasta with butter for Gracie, red sauce on the side for Noah, Parmesan for both. The rhythms of family dinner without the missing piece. "Can I have the green cup?" Gracie asked, the first word she'd spoken since the interview. "Sure, sweetie." I reached for it, grateful for the request. Normal? We needed normal. My phone buzzed as I was serving the pasta. Kara's name flashed on the screen. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Kellen, I just received notice. The judge has granted Tessa supervised visitation at the Bridgepoint Family Center, starting this Saturday at 10 a.m. My breath caught. "That soon?" "It's standard procedure. The court prioritizes maintaining parent-child relationships during proceedings." Her voice was measured. "It will be fully supervised. You'll drop the children off, and a professional monitor will be present the entire time." I stared at the phone after we disconnected. Saturday. 3 days away. I'd have to face Tessa again sooner than I'd expected. The Bridgepoint Family Center looked like a cross between a doctor's office and a daycare. Beige walls, inoffensive watercolor paintings, and that distinct institutional smell masked by air freshener. I held Noah and Gracie's hands as we walked through the waiting room, where fake plants gathered dust in corners and informational pamphlets fanned out on low tables. "Dad, I don't want to go," Gracie whispered, tightening her grip on my fingers. I knelt down to her level. "Remember what we talked about? It's just for an hour, and there will be nice people in the room the whole time." Noah stood quietly, shoulders tight, eyes darting around the space. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head, calculating exits and danger spots. No 10-year-old should have to think that way. A woman with a gentle smile and a lanyard approached us. "You must be the Hayes family." I'm Monica. I'll be supervising today's visit. She led us down a short hallway toward a room with large windows, observation panels that let me see in but kept me out. Through the glass, I spotted Tessa already seated at a kid-sized table. She'd done her makeup carefully, wore a new sweater I didn't recognize, playing the part. "Children, your mom is excited to see you," Monica said. "Mr. Hayes, you can wait in the reception area or observe from here." "I'll stay," I said, making sure Noah and Gracie heard me. "I'll be right outside the whole time." Monica nodded and opened the door. Tessa's face brightened instantly. "My babies," she cooed, arms outstretched. "I've missed you so much." Gracie hesitated, but Noah walked forward with the stiff movements of someone crossing thin ice. Tessa hugged them both, her eyes finding mine over their shoulders. The sweetness vanished, replaced by a cold hatred that made my stomach clench. I stood behind the glass for the entire hour, watching Tessa alternate between playing board games with forced enthusiasm and asking probing questions that made Monica intervene. "Are you eating enough at Daddy's? Does he cook for you?" Tessa asked, arranging game pieces. "Ms. Hayes," Monica interjected, "remember our guidelines about discussion topics." Tessa's smile tightened. "I'm just concerned about my children's welfare." Later, she tried again. "Do you miss me? Daddy won't even let me call you." Monica's notebook filled with notes as the visit progressed. Noah barely spoke, answering only direct questions with one-word responses. Gracie eventually warmed up enough to show Tessa a drawing from school, but flinched when her mother moved too quickly to take it. I logged everything in the pocket notebook Kara had insisted I carry. Each redirect from Monica, each uncomfortable shift from the kids, each time Tessa's mask slipped. When the hour ended, Monica stood. "Time to say goodbye, everyone." Tessa hugged the kids again, lingering longer than comfortable. As Monica guided Noah and Gracie toward the door, Tessa locked eyes with me through the glass. Her smile disappeared. She walked to the dividing window while the kids were distracted by Monica showing them stickers. "You're dead in court," she hissed, voice low enough that only I could hear through the thin barrier. "Enjoy them while you can." I didn't respond, just wrote her exact words in my notebook, including the time, 11:07 a.m. Later that night, after tucking Noah and Gracie into bed with extra stories and reassurances, I sat at the kitchen table and transferred my notes to the detailed journal Kara had provided. The threat stood out in stark relief against the page. I added context, Tessa's body language, the exact phrasing who else might have overheard. I pulled out Kara's instruction sheet about documentation. Direct threats must be recorded immediately, with timestamps and context. Note witnesses if applicable. Report threatening language to center staff before your next visit. My fingers traced the lines of her guidance as I remembered the cold calculation in Tessa's eyes. This wasn't an empty threat spoken in anger. It was a promise. The next morning, while the kids were at school, I gathered our bank statements from the past year. The pattern was clear once I highlighted it. Cash withdrawals, usually between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., often on weeknights when Tessa claimed to be home. I cross-referenced with my work schedule, finding days when I'd been on overnight shifts and she was supposedly watching the kids. I slipped the statements into a manila folder, placing it beside the USB drive containing the video from the hallway attack. The evidence was building, piece by methodical piece. By 9:30, I was backing out of the driveway, folder secure in my messenger bag. Kara's office was 20 minutes away in light traffic. I gripped the steering wheel, resolve hardening. Every document, every recorded threat, every piece of evidence was another brick in the wall that would keep Noah and Gracie safe. "This is good, Kellen. Really good." Kara spread the documents across her desk, organizing them into neat piles. I'd handed over everything, the photos of my cuts, screenshots of text messages, bank statements, and my detailed journal entry. She examined each item with careful attention, occasionally making notes or flagging pages with colored tabs. "These texts are particularly damaging," she said, holding up printouts. "This one, where she wrote, 'I shouldn't have thrown it,' directly contradicts her claim that you were the aggressor." I nodded, remembering how my hands had shaken when I'd captured those screenshots. "She sent those the morning after, before she realized I might use them." Kara picked up the bank statements next. "And these withdrawals, they establish a pattern that undermines her credibility. $3,000 over 2 months, all in cash, all at odd hours." She looked up at me. "Any idea where the money went?" "No." When I asked, that's what triggered the bottle incident. Kara arranged everything in a leather portfolio. "Judge Patel is handling our preliminary hearing next Tuesday. He's thorough, fair, and doesn't tolerate manipulation of the family court system." She leaned forward. "Based on what I'm seeing here, I believe we have a strong case for temporary sole custody." My throat tightened. "You really think so?" "The evidence is compelling. The officer's report, the CPS interview notes with the children's disclosures, this financial pattern, and most importantly, the video." She tapped the USB drive. "Courts don't like to separate children from either parent without good reason, but Judge Patel's priority will be the children's safety and stability." On the drive home, I rehearsed what I'd tell Noah and Gracie. Nothing specific about court, just reassurance that things were moving forward. They deserved stability, not the weight of adult concerns. That evening, I stirred tomato sauce while water boiled for pasta. Noah sat at the kitchen table, homework spread before him, pencil tapping against his math worksheet. "Dad?" he asked suddenly, voice small. "Yeah, buddy? When we see Mom again, will she yell like before?" The spoon in my hand froze mid-stir. I set it down and turned to face him. Gracie had wandered in from the living room, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "The visits at the center are different," I explained, choosing my words carefully. "There are people there whose job is to make sure everyone stays calm." Noah's eyes dropped to his worksheet. "But what if she gets mad anyway?" I pulled out the chair beside him and sat down. "If anything ever makes you uncomfortable, with Mom, with me, with anyone, you can always tell me or another adult you trust, like your teacher or Ms. Monica at the center." "What if no one believes us?" Gracie's voice was barely audible. I remembered being 7 years old, how enormous and complicated the world had seemed. I reached for her hand. "I will always believe you. Always." That night, after tucking them in, I wrote in my journal. Noah asked about future visits with Tessa today. Both children expressed fear about her anger. Noah showed difficulty concentrating on homework. Gracie carried her stuffed rabbit constantly, something she hasn't done since she was 4. Reassured them about safety measures at the visitation center. We'll speak with their counselor about additional support strategies. The courthouse hallway buzzed with quiet conversation as we waited outside Judge Patel's courtroom the following Tuesday. Kara reviewed notes beside me, occasionally pointing out key details we needed to emphasize. When the bailiff called our case, my heart hammered. Tessa sat at the opposing table with her attorney, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a conservative blue dress I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back neatly. Judge Patel, a composed woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewed the file before her. "Ms. Liu, you may proceed," she said. Kara presented our evidence methodically: the hallway incident, the documented injuries, the children's disclosures to CPS, the financial irregularities, and, finally, the threatening comment at the visitation center. "Your Honor, we request temporary sole custody be granted to Mr. Hayes, with Ms. Hayes limited to supervised visitation until a full hearing can be conducted." Tessa's attorney argued that I had manipulated the situation, claiming the video was taken out of context and that Tessa was defending herself. Judge Patel's expression remained neutral until he finished. "I'd like to view the video evidence again," she said. The courtroom fell silent as the footage played. I heard Tessa's voice through the speakers. "They should see what a coward looks like." Then the crash of glass, Gracie's scream, and Tessa lunging toward the camera. Judge Patel removed her glasses. "Based on the evidence presented, I am granting temporary sole legal and physical custody to Mr. Hayes. The protective order will remain in effect. Ms. Hayes will continue supervised visitation once weekly." Relief washed through me like a physical force. Kara squeezed my arm as Judge Patel continued outlining the terms. That night, for the first time in weeks, Noah slept through without waking from nightmares. The next morning, Gracie decorated my lunch bag with a carefully drawn heart, asking if she could put her name inside it. "Of course you can," I told her, watching as she carefully printed Gracie in purple marker. For that moment, at least, things felt almost normal. The weight hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted, becoming manageable in a way it hadn't been before. I kissed the top of Gracie's head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, allowing myself to feel something I'd almost forgotten: hope. The family center's waiting room was quieter than usual that Saturday morning. A middle-aged couple sat in the far corner, their faces tight with the same strain I recognized in my own reflection. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and the faint perfume of artificial flowers that stood in a vase by the front desk. "Mr. Hayes?" Monica, the center supervisor, approached with a clipboard. "Noah and Gracie can go in now." I knelt down to their level. "I'll be right out here the whole time, okay? Remember what we talked about?" Noah nodded solemnly, but Gracie clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. "Will you watch through the window?" "The whole time," I promised, straightening the collar of her blue cardigan. Through the observation window, I watched Tessa greet them. She wore a pink blouse I didn't recognize and had styled her hair differently. For the first 30 minutes, everything seemed normal, almost painfully so. They played board games. Tessa helped Noah with a puzzle. Her voice remained measured, her movements controlled. Monica stood beside me. "She's been more compliant the past few visits," she observed. I nodded but kept my eyes fixed on them. Something felt off about Tessa's calm. It was too perfect, too rehearsed. About 40 minutes into the visit, Tessa approached the door where a staff member named Ryan was monitoring. "Gracie needs to use the bathroom," she said, her voice carrying through the intercom. "Can I take her?" Ryan hesitated. "I'll have a female staff member escort her." "She's embarrassed," Tessa insisted. "She won't go with a stranger. It's just down the hall." Ryan glanced toward Monica, who was momentarily distracted by a phone call. He made a decision I would replay in my mind 1,000 times after. "Just to the bathroom and right back," he instructed, holding the door open. I stepped forward. "Wait!" But they were already moving down the hallway, Tessa's hand firmly around Gracie's small wrist. Something twisted in my stomach. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. "They should be back by now," I said to Ryan, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. He knocked on the women's restroom door. No answer. He called for a female staff member to check inside. "Empty," she reported, her face pale. Monica dropped her phone and hit an alarm button behind the desk. A shrill sound filled the building as staff began rushing through doorways, checking exits. "They've secured the building," Monica told me, her professional composure cracking. "But the back emergency exit shows it was opened 3 minutes ago." My heartbeat roared in my ears. She took her. She took my daughter. The next hour blurred. Police swarmed the center. I paced the lobby, giving descriptions, answering questions with a voice that didn't sound like my own. Noah sat shell-shocked in a chair. Officer Reynolds crouched beside him. "What's Tessa's car?" Reynolds asked me. "White Toyota Camry, 2018, I said, my hands shaking so badly I could barely retrieve my phone to show him a photo. "License plate, JRW 4729. Reynolds nodded grimly. We're issuing an Amber Alert right now. My neighbor Susan had picked up Noah and taken him home. I couldn't leave. Couldn't do anything but wait at the center where police had established a command post. Kara arrived, her face grim. They're checking highway cameras, she told me. Does Tessa have anywhere she might go? Any family properties? The realization hit me like a physical blow. Her mother's lake cabin, about 2 hours north. We went there a few times when we were first married. 4 agonizing hours later, my phone rang. Reynolds. We found them, he said, his voice steady. Whitaker property in Lakeville. Gracie appears unharmed. I nearly collapsed. Can I talk to her? They're bringing her out now. We'll transport her to meet you. The reunion happened at a small police station halfway between the lake and home. When they brought Gracie in, her face was tear-streaked, her clothes rumpled. She ran to me, and I scooped her up, burying my face in her hair, breathing in her scent mixed with fierce sweat and dust. "Daddy," she whispered, her small body trembling against mine. "I've got you," I murmured. "I've got you now." Over her shoulder, I watched uniformed officers escorting Tessa toward a cruiser. Her face was a mask of defiance, but when our eyes met briefly, I saw something crack beneath the surface, the realization, perhaps, that she had made an irreversible mistake. Gracie clung to me in the back seat of Reynolds's car as we drove home. "Mom said we were going on a secret adventure," she whispered. "She said you wouldn't find us." I held her tighter, rage and relief battling inside me. Noah was waiting at the front door with Susan. When he saw us, he ran down the steps and threw his arms around both of us. We stood there on the driveway, the 3 of us locked together, while neighbors watched from their windows and police radios crackled in the background. Later that night, after both kids had finally fallen asleep in my bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. Kara had called twice with updates. Tessa was being held without bail, charged with custodial interference and violation of a court order. I looked at the family photos still hanging on our wall, taken last summer at the beach, all 4 of us smiling. That family was gone now. Tessa had drawn a line, and then she had crossed it, taking our daughter across with her. Some boundaries, once violated, can never be restored. The first week after Tessa took Gracie was like walking through a minefield in the dark. Every sound made Noah jump. Gracie wouldn't let me out of her sight for more than a few minutes. She'd wake up crying, convinced her mother was hiding in the closet. I called Kara the morning after we got Gracie back. "What do we do now?" I asked, stepping into the backyard so the kids wouldn't hear. "Judge Patel has suspended all visitation indefinitely," she said. "We're heading toward a final custody hearing. In the meantime, get those kids into therapy. Document everything about the abduction attempt. And Kellen? Build them a routine. Kids need predictability after trauma." That afternoon, I sat down with a calendar and colored markers. Saturday mornings became pancake breakfast, a tradition my dad had started when I was a kid. Tuesday afternoons were for therapy with Ms. Elena Alvarez, a child therapist Kara recommended. Sunday evenings became movie night with popcorn and blanket forts. Ms. Alvarez was in her early 50s, with kind eyes and colorful scarves. At our first session, she spoke directly to Noah and Gracie. "Sometimes our brains get scared even when our bodies are safe," she explained, offering them each a stuffed animal. "My job is to help your brain catch up to knowing you're okay now." She taught them breathing exercises, balloon breaths that filled their bellies. But the most important thing came during our 3rd session. "We need a safety word," Ms. Alvarez suggested. "Something that means, 'I feel scared,' without having to explain why." Noah picked raincoat. If either of them said it, I would immediately remove them from wherever we were. No questions asked. It was small, but I could see how it gave them a sense of control. "Dad," Noah asked one night after Gracie had fallen asleep, "what if Mom tries to take us again?" I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. The police know what happened. The court knows. There are a lot of grown-ups making sure that doesn't happen again. But what if she finds a way? His voice was so small. I thought about the security system I'd installed, the new pickup procedures at school, the police drive-bys Reynolds had arranged. Then we'd use our raincoat word, and I'd keep you safe, I told him. That's my most important job. He nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to trust me enough to close his eyes. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Kara came to the house to prepare me. Tessa's attorney will try to paint this as a one-time mistake made by a desperate mother, she warned, spreading papers across my kitchen table. We need to show the pattern of instability and the ongoing risk she poses. We reviewed everything: the hallway video, the texts, the CPS interviews, the police report from the lake cabin. Kara built a timeline that showed escalation, not isolated incidents. Judge Patel needs to see that this isn't about punishing Tessa, Kara said. It's about protecting Noah and Gracie. The night before court, I read bedtime stories longer than usual. First to Gracie, who fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit. Then to Noah, who stayed awake, eyes serious in the glow of his nightlight. "Will Mom try to take us again?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I set the book aside and lay next to him on the narrow bed. "No, the protection is much stronger now. Tomorrow the judge will make decisions that keep you and Gracie safe." "Are you scared?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on their feelings that I hadn't examined my own. "A little," I admitted. "But being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do what's right, even when you are scared." He nodded and closed his eyes. I stayed until his breathing deepened into sleep. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school with extra tight hugs, then drove to the courthouse, my stomach in knots. The hallway outside courtroom 4B was quiet, most people already inside. I checked my watch, still 15 minutes early. Kara had texted that she was parking. "Kellen." I turned to see Tessa standing by the water fountain. She looked thinner, her eyes hollow with dark circles beneath them. She wore a conservative blue dress I'd never seen before. "You can't keep my kids from me," she said, moving closer. Her voice had that familiar edge, the one that used to make me brace for impact. "They're my kids too," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "And I'm not keeping them from you, Tessa. You are." "What's that supposed to mean?" Her eyes flashed. "Every choice you made put a wall between you and them," I said. "The bottle you threw? Taking Gracie from the visitation center. Scaring them so badly they need a safety word just to feel secure in their own home." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm their mother. And I'm their father," I replied. "The one who's been there, picking up the pieces." The bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. "Hayes versus Hayes," he called. "Judge Patel is ready to begin." I followed Kara into the courtroom, my shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Judge Patel sat high on the bench, her black robes somehow making the room feel colder. I spotted Tessa already seated at the opposite table, her attorney leaning close and whispering in her ear. "Ready?" Kara asked as we took our seats. I nodded, throat dry. "As I'll ever be." Judge Patel called the court to order, her voice carrying that particular blend of authority that demanded attention. "This is the final hearing in Hayes versus Hayes regarding custody and parental rights. I've reviewed the filings. Ms. Liu, you may begin." Kara stood, straightening her navy blazer. She moved to the center of the room with the confidence of someone who'd spent her life in courtrooms like this one. "Your Honor, this case isn't complicated," she began. "It's about protecting 2 children from an escalating pattern of violence and instability." She turned to the clerk, handing over a USB drive. "With the court's permission, I'd like to play Exhibit A." The lights dimmed slightly as a screen lowered. My stomach twisted as the video began, the one from our hallway that night. Tessa's voice crackling through the phone speaker, the crash of glass, Gracie's terrified, "Mom!" Stop!" in the background. I watched Judge Patel's face remain impassive, but her eyes narrowed at the sound of Noah crying. After the video ended, Kara continued methodically, like she was assembling engine parts that could only fit together one way. "Now, Exhibit B, Your Honor, audio recorded during a supervised visitation on March 12th. The recording played Tessa's whispered threat. 'You're dead in court.' The visitation center supervisor testified next, confirming she'd heard the same words. Exhibit C, Kara continued. The police report from April 3rd, when Ms. Hayes violated court orders by abducting Gracie Hayes during supervised visitation. Officer Reynolds took the stand, describing how we'd found them at Darlene's lake cabin. Lights off, Gracie hungry and frightened. I remember how small her hand felt in mine when I finally reached her. And finally, Exhibit D, Kara said, presenting printed pages of text messages. Ms. Hayes's own words, admitting I shouldn't have thrown it, and I lost it, showing consciousness of guilt. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall between Tessa and the kids. I didn't feel satisfaction, just a hollow certainty that this was necessary. The guardian ad litem spoke next, a soft-voiced woman who'd visited our home twice and met with the children separately. Noah and Gracie express fear, not confusion, Your Honor, she testified. During our sessions, both children independently described feeling unsafe in their mother's presence. Noah's drawings consistently show jagged lines around the maternal figure, which is consistent with children who've witnessed violence. I remembered Noah's stick-figure family, those angry zigzags surrounding Tessa. It still hurt to think about. Mr. Hayes has provided a structured environment, she continued. The children are thriving in his care despite the trauma they've experienced. From the corner of my eye, I saw Tessa's face contorting. He's turned them against me, she burst out suddenly. Ms. Hayes, you'll have your opportunity to speak, Judge Patel warned sharply. But Tessa wasn't finished. This is all manipulated. He coached them what to say. Ms. Hayes, Judge Patel repeated, her voice firmer. One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. Tessa sank back into her chair, her attorney whispering urgently in her ear. After what felt like hours, Judge Patel finally turned to me. Mr. Hayes, would you like to make a statement? I stood, legs strangely steady beneath me. The rehearsed words Kara and I had practiced felt inadequate now. I looked at Tessa, really looked at her, and spoke from a place I hadn't accessed before. I never wanted this, I began. I wanted my children to have two parents who loved them safely. But that night, in our hallway, my voice caught, but I pushed through. That night, when I put my body between Tessa and our children, I made a promise to Noah and Gracie. I promised I would never let anyone hurt them again. I felt the weight of every eye in the courtroom. I'm not trying to punish Tessa, but I will not let you use them to hurt anyone, I said, looking directly at her, including yourself. The silence in the courtroom felt physical, like something you could touch. Tessa suddenly lurched to her feet. He's brainwashing them. They're my children. Two deputies stepped forward from the back wall as Judge Patel's gavel came down. That's enough, Ms. Hayes, she said, her voice like steel. Tessa remained standing, trembling visibly as Judge Patel shuffled papers on her bench, preparing to deliver her ruling. The gavel struck once more, sharp and final in the tense silence. Judge Patel lowered her glasses and looked directly at Tessa, her expression stern but not unkind. After careful review of all evidence presented in this case, I am prepared to render my decision. She shuffled the papers before her one final time. The court finds overwhelming evidence of domestic violence, willful violation of court orders, and actions that have directly endangered the well-being of minor children, Noah and Gracie Hayes. The courtroom was silent. I felt a strange weightlessness, like I was floating just above my chair. Therefore, This court grants permanent sole legal and physical custody of Noah Hayes and Gracie Hayes to their father, Kellen Hayes, effective immediately. I exhaled slowly, my vision blurring slightly at the edges. Furthermore, given Ms. Hayes's demonstrated pattern of escalating behavior, including the abduction attempt on April 3rd, this court terminates all visitation rights previously granted to Tessa Hayes. Tessa made a strangled sound beside her attorney. The court also issues a 10-year protective order prohibiting Ms. Hayes from contacting Mr. Hayes or the minor children through any means, including third parties. Judge Patel's gaze was unflinching. This decision is not made lightly, but follows months of documented evidence showing a consistent disregard for court orders and the emotional well-being of these children. I remembered Noah's drawings, the jagged lines, the faces with downturned mouths. I thought of Gracie's tiny hand clutching mine after we found her at the lake cabin. Additionally, Judge Patel continued, this court refers the affidavit submitted by Darlene Whitaker to the District Attorney's Office for perjury review, as testimony and evidence have conclusively demonstrated false statements made under oath. I heard a gasp from the back of the courtroom. Darlene, who had slipped in during testimony. This case will also be referred for criminal sentencing on charges of domestic violence, child endangerment, and custodial interference. Judge Patel looked at me. Mr. Hayes, the court commends your restraint and focus on the children's well-being throughout these proceedings. The court clerk's stamp echoed through the room with a finality that felt like the closing of a heavy door. Somewhere in my memory, I could still hear the sound of glass shattering against our hallway wall. As the judge stood to leave, Tessa suddenly lurched toward me, desperation in her eyes. Two deputies moved forward instantly. "Kellen, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Tell them I'll change. Tell them I need to see my children." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but clarity. This woman had thrown a bottle at my head with our children watching, had scratched my face when I wouldn't let her have her way, had stolen our daughter from a supervised visit and hidden her away. "No," I said simply. The deputies took her arms gently but firmly. As they escorted her from the courtroom, she kept looking back, her face a mask of disbelief that this was really happening. Kara squeezed my shoulder. "It's over," she said quietly. But I knew better. It wasn't over. It was beginning. The real work of helping Noah and Gracie heal. Weeks passed, then months. Life found a quieter rhythm. Noah practiced free throws in the driveway while I grilled chicken on Sunday evenings. Gracie taped her drawings to the refrigerator. Bright pictures of the three of us under yellow suns. No jagged lines anywhere. The holidays came without the tension that had shadowed previous years. We made our own traditions. Gingerbread houses that collapsed hilariously, movie marathons with popcorn battles, and midnight hot chocolate on Christmas Eve. Ms. Alvarez, their therapist, noted progress during our Tuesday sessions. "They're beginning to feel secure again," she told me one afternoon as the kids played in her waiting room. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel safe. I received occasional updates through Kara. Tessa had been sentenced to 18 months for the combined charges, with mandatory counseling. She'd been removed from 2 different programs for refusing to acknowledge responsibility, still believing herself the victim in all this. Darlene stopped calling when the perjury notice arrived. The last I heard, she'd moved to Florida, leaving no forwarding address. Sometimes people ask if it feels like revenge, winning so completely. It doesn't. It never did. It feels like safety, like choosing the door that locks from the inside and throws the deadbolt on chaos. Justice isn't fireworks. It's a steady light that stays on after the crowd goes home. If you're standing in your own hallway, bleeding and scared, listen to me. Love your kids more than you fear the fight. Document everything. Tell the truth. And don't apologize for protecting the people who look to you for shelter. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.